Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So, in yesterday's class, we began the chapter on oaths and vows, and we talked about what that means and where it comes from, some of the adillah, and how the oath only for us in the Shafi'i madhab is only by including the mentioning of Allah Ta'ala, Most High, His names and attributes. We talked about that. Now we are going to talk about vows and nudhur, and we will learn about what kind of statement would count as a vow and what doesn't count as a vow. And this is a very interesting part of Islamic law because it is very literal, and as you will come to see, some of the examples are hilarious, and it is very custom based. And a lot of this you find in the section of divorce, for example. If a man says to his, vows to his wife that if she does such and such, he will divorce her, etc. We've talked about that in the section of divorce. This is kind of where it comes into full color. So we're going to learn about do you interpret if this is an actual vow that you have to carry forth or you don't have to carry forth. And of course, if you carry it forth, then you have to expiate. And the expiation is the other part of the conversation of oaths and vows, which I don't think I'll get to it in this lecture, we'll talk about it in the next lecture. And then we'll also learn what kind of statement doesn't count as a vow that you have to fulfill. Al-laghu, if you said something by mistake, or if you're overwhelmed with anger or emotion or something like that, and you said something sort of nonsensically, then the Sharia says then there's no expiation necessary because it's not something that you intended. So also the intention is a component. So the literal interpretation, as we will see, the literal interpretation, the cultural explanation of what you said, how is that manifest in a cultural context, and also the intention. Those three things are the three kind of components we're going to be looking at in the vows. Because there's a lot of examples and a lot of kind of permutations, I think that's the only little chunk that I want to take for today's class, because I want you kind of to get used to hearing some of these examples. Even though they might seem ridiculous, it's important that you can understand those three components. And we'll begin this inshallah in the next clip. All right, we begin the way we normally begin, by turning to the text of Abi Shuja' radiallahu anhu. We'll read it in Arabic first. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. ومن حلف بصدقة ماله فهو مخير بين الصدقة أو كفارة يمين ولا شيء في اللغو اليمين. ومن حلف أن لا يفعل شيئا فأمر غيره بفعله لم يحنث. ومن حلف على فعل أمرين ففعل أحدهما لم يحنث. And then وكفارة اليمين, we'll probably take that in the next lecture. So he says rahimahullah, Qadi Abu Shuja says radiallahu anhu, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and the next. Whoever vows to give his property as charity must choose between giving away all of his property or making an expiation for breaking an oath. No expiation is necessary for oaths made unthinkingly. If one swears to abstain from something, he has not broken his oath if he performs something else. If one swears to abstain from something, he has not broken his oath if he orders someone else to perform it. If one swears to avoid two things, he has not broken his oath if he performs just one of them. So you see, it's very literal, and we'll get into the examples. But before the examples, let's turn to the adillah to see what we have in store. Now we return to Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 89. لا يؤاخذكم الله باللغو في أيمانكم. Allah will not take you to account to the oath and the vow that you say unthinkably باللغو. ولكن يؤاخذكم بما عقدتم الأيمان. But rather Allah takes you to account to that which you have affirmed by your vow. So it's the same verse, it's the same dalil, but the second half of it, which is the first part that's mentioned in the verse, constitutes the dalil for this second conversation on oaths and vows. The Prophet ﷺ said, as recorded in Muslim, this is on the authority of Uqba ibn Amir, kafaratul nadri kafaratul yamin. So the expiation for the vow is the expiation for the oath, so they're the same. And that we'll get to that. Um, okay, well actually those are really the main dalil for today's discussion. The other stuff is for later on. Okay, let me put these away and then get us going with our discussion, inshallah. Turning to the Hashiyah of Shaykh al-Bajuri, rahimahullah. Sorry, wrong page. Okay, so the first thing is, what are the conditions for the person making the oath or the vow that constitutes a real oath in the vow? So the first sort of like in the pyramid of like legal thinking, the first thing we want to think about is who can make a vow versus who cannot make a vow. So every time we have a definition, as you've kind of gotten used to by now, each component of the definition excludes something else. And that's why we in logic we say that a good definition is jama' mana. A good definition, jama', it brings together the necessary components of that which we're defining, and it's mana, and it kicks out the things that are not important. So he says, and this is from the Sharh and the Hashiyah. So al-halif, the person who's going to make an oath and a vow, kullu mukallifin mukhtarin natiqin qasidan lil yamin. So he gives us 4 conditions. The first one is it has to be a mukallaf. So he has to be of age. He or she has to be of age. So anybody that's less than the age of the age of maturity, or they have no taklif because they're insane or something like that. The taklif is suspended. A drunken person, etc. Their oath and vow does not count. Mukhtar, so somebody who has freely chosen to make this oath and vow, not somebody who was coerced. So we kick out the person who was coerced. Natiq, the person who clearly articulates. Usually this is meant to be like somebody that speaks, or if someone is unable to speak, they have indicated in a clear way, like through sign language, or a clear way that it's unambiguous. Qasid lil yamin, the person who is intending to engage in the oath or the vow. So that's a neat little it concludes the last section that we talked about. It's a neat little way to remember that these are the 4 conditions for the person to make an oath that would count. They have to be mukallaf, they have to be freely doing it, they have to speak it, articulate it, and they have to intend it. And when one of these things is breached, we'll go back and we'll see that the oath doesn't count. And this is, when you know this fiqh, this is how you can undo a lot of the divorce problems. So a lot of people, when they use these type of oaths and vows and divorce pronouncements, a lot of time a clever mufti would be able to kind of dig into the details, fueled by their knowledge of fiqh, to kind of help the couple get out of that problem. Not always, but many times I have seen that. Okay, and then he says, so whoever vows to give away his property as charity must choose between giving away the property or making an expiation for breaking the oath. So if you say clearly that alayya sadaqatu mali, upon me it is obligatory for me to give my wealth in charity. Well, it becomes a literal thing. As I said in the introductory clip, these matters are taken very literally. So either you execute what you have vowed to do, or you are going to pay the expiation, which is to choose between 3 things that will come, the freeing of a slave, the feeding, or the it'am, or the sadaqah, which will come in tomorrow's lecture. So that would be a case in which the kafara is optional. You can do so. There's 2 sets of options. The first option is either you carry out your vow, or you expiate. In the expiation, you can choose between the three things: the freeing, the feeding, or the clothing of the those that are in need. We'll get to that when we get to that in the metan. We're not there right here. Right? We're not there yet. So this kind of gives us a sense of how serious the vow is. And that's why we said in the past, it's not good to speak like this. Of course, if you are making a vow to do something good because you're encouraging yourself to do something good and you're encouraging those around you to do something good, that's different. But in general, this is not like the way that we want to learn how to speak, because it's serious. These vows have serious implications. That is the dominant position. There is another position that says if you say it, you have to do it. I mean, thank God that that's not the dominant position in the madhab, but it is a difference of opinion within the madhab. And again, this only underscores the seriousness of the statement to start out with. There are two dissenting opinions. The majority opinion, the dominant position, is what we just said. If you say something that would obligate you to do something, a vow, you have the option to carry out the vow or to expiate in one of the three things. That's the dominant position. The other position is if you say that, you automatically have to expiate. The second weaker position is that you have to carry out what you said. So there are two minor positions in this regard. But the dominant position is that if you say an oath, then you have to you have the option of either carrying it out and just fulfilling it, or expiating for it. This is a case in which there are two minor dissenting positions in the madhab. Okay, now the next thing is about saying al-laghu. If you say something out of an overabundance of emotion or overabundance of anger, you weren't prepared to do it, you weren't prepared to carry it out, then that type of vow doesn't count out to start with, because it lacks one of the cardinal conditions, which is the intention to do something. And let me pick up this discussion in the next clip, inshallah. So we just arrived at the second part of the text for today. No expiation is necessary for oaths made unthinkingly. Al-laghu. And just to repeat, this usually comes when there's an abundance of emotion or fear or anger, and it's just something that kind of you blurted out. You weren't really intending to say it, and because the intention is not there, and because you didn't really have any control over what you were saying, it was sort of an emotional reaction, then that doesn't count. Like Allah says in the Quran, لا يؤاخذكم الله باللغو في أيمانكم. Allah does not take to account those oaths and vows that you say without the intention, or unthinkingly, as the translation is. Okay. Now, this is where it kind of gets a little bit interesting. If one swears to abstain from something, he has not broken the oath if he performs something else. So if somebody says, for example, I want to give you the examples from the Hashiyah. So if somebody says, for example, I will not sell, or I will not buy, but then he gifts, then he hasn't broken his vow, because he did not sell or he did not buy. Gifting, a hiba, is another type of transaction. So you see, it's very literal. It's a very literal thing. If he or she does the thing that they swore not to do on purpose, knowingly and willingly, then they have broken their vow. How about somebody who does something out of ignorance? Then there is no breaking of the vow in that case. So, like if I said, I swear I'm not going to give salams to Zayd, and I walked into a dark room and I heard that there was somebody and I said salam alaikum and it turned out that it was Zayd. Okay, I was jahil. I didn't realize that. I didn't intend to break my vow. Again, I know some of these examples are very comical, but these examples the reason they are written this way is to help you understand. Not that this is sort of necessarily a real circumstance, but you can probably extrapolate in real life, or you probably will come across something that will be similar to one of these examples. So if somebody says, for example, that they swore not to engage in any transactions, the default understanding of that is a sahih transaction. So if somebody engaged in a fasid transaction, then when we talked about buyu'a, we said there's sahih and fasid, then engaging in a fasid transaction would not break the oath. Okay. Now, if somebody said, he gives examples from ibadat. If somebody says that, same thing with the sahih and fasid example, but he said if somebody says, for example, I swear not to pray, and then they prayed janazah, the janazah prayer, he says they do not break their oath because in the urf, in the custom, we don't refer to the janazah as salah. Like if I said I went to the mosque to pray, you don't think you prayed janazah prayer. You actually would say we did the janazah, or we prayed the janazah or something like that. You would use the word janazah. So customarily amongst Muslims, we don't refer to the janazah as an independent prayer. So if you said I swore not to pray, why would somebody say that? I don't know, but we're just making an example so we can understand the literal and cultural context of interpretation of these oaths and vows. And they went to do the janazah prayer, then they wouldn't break it. This is another funny one. This is the one. This gave me a good chuckle. So if somebody swore that they will not eat grass, and then they swallowed a mouthful of grass without chewing it, they would break their oath, because putting something in the mouth and swallowing it is customarily referred to as eating. So very, very literal. Now, you might be laughing, or you might be scratching your head, or you might be thinking, why did I sign up for this class? This is so ridiculous. Again, the fuqaha, the jurists were masters at coming up with ridiculous examples so that you can get a laugh probably out of it, and that you will remember the rule behind it, the principle behind it. Now, why is this important? It's important because if somebody comes with a divorce, and this happens to me all the time, more in the Arab world than in the Western world, but it happens nonetheless. Actually, that's not true. There are Western Muslims that unfortunately talk like this. And a man says to his wife, if you leave the house, I'm going to divorce you. Actually, I take back what I said. This actually equally happens. Muslims have this problem because it's just they do it in a different way in the English language. So a man says to his wife, if you leave the house, you're divorced. What does that mean? Like you're a prisoner? So if somebody comes to me with that, the default is I would interpret what he said ala al-fawr, immediately. Meaning if you leave the house now, then you are divorced. Not if you leave the house forever, because he didn't say forever. Because culturally, that's what we would assume. Like that's how we speak to one another. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. It means don't go anywhere right now. It doesn't mean don't go anywhere forever. We don't talk like that in the English language or in any language that I know of. No one means that. So the grass swallowing example is funny, but now you know where it has some real implications. There are more. Let me give you some more of these. He says at the end of like a whole page, 2 pages, he says, وَهُنَا فُرُوعَ كَثِيرًا وَفِي هَذَا الْقَدْرِ كِفَايَةٌ. He said, these examples and these branches, there's too many of them, and what I've given you is enough. And he gives like 2 pages of them. I'm not even giving you all of that. If a man swore not to free his slave, but did a mukataba, it's a type of a way that you can free yourself through purchasing your freedom, then he doesn't break his oath because it's a different type of transaction. If a man wait, let me get this one here. Okay, sorry. Let me go back to the hashish one because there's a continuation to it. So the first thing I said is if a man swore by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he would not eat hashish, not eat grass, had a mouthful of it, and then he swallowed it, we would say that he broke his vow because customarily what that man just did is considered eating. Okay? However, an opposite to this, and this is very common, this is more advanced fiqh, but you guys are I want you to be advanced. An opposite, similar to it, nadhiruhu we say, the similar to it, if a man swore that he would divorce his wife by not, and he would not eat a mouthful of grass, and he did the same thing, he would not break his vow and would not divorce her because we would not call that eating linguistically, because linguistically, al-akl, eating is to masticate and to swallow. And then he says, to finish the sentence, if a man swore not to wear a ring, and he wore his ring in other than his ring finger, he wouldn't break his vow. Because for the man, what is customarily is that you wear the ring in your, and you don't wear the ring in your pinky, your pinky, al-khinsar. And you wear it in another finger, you don't break it because the sunnah is to wear the ring in the pinky. Although there are hadith that the Prophet ﷺ wore it on either finger, and on the left and the right. Actually, all four, I believe there are traditions of different strengths. But, when you think of ring, sunnah, man, you're thinking of the pinky on either hand. So again, very literal. Now, why in the hashish example, why does the man not divorce his wife? Because we don't want the people to get divorced. We want to keep people together. So the bias in the divorce is to try to keep the couple together, not to get them to divorce. Of course, we want to abide by the Sharia. It's not about violating the Sharia, but you see how the same act can have different implications depending on which funnel it's going down in Islamic law. I gave you the example of the slave. If a man swore that he's not going to write with this pencil or pen, and then the tip of it broke, a pencil I guess, and the tip of it broke, so he sharpened it, he does not break his oath, because if I sharpened it, now I have a new pencil. Again, very literal, right? So people will laugh and say, but what's the point? But the point is to show you how the details of how we would interpret something like this. I see that I'm running out of time. I'll pick this up in the next and final clip, inshallah. Continuing with these examples of oaths and vows. So if a man says, I say man because I'm a man, I apologize. I mean, if somebody says they swear not to eat lunch, or not to have dinner, or not to have suhoor, they would not break their oath. Like if I say, I'm not going to have suhoor, I'm fasting, it's either Ramadan or outside of Ramadan, so wallahi, I'm not going to have suhoor. And then I eat, after the sun rises. Well, that's not suhoor. Or if I say I'm not going to have lunch, and then I eat breakfast, I don't break my oath, so on and so forth. So it depends on the times when you would eat. Okay. I think that that's enough of examples. Maybe let me try to move on. We don't have that much more, but hopefully you get the idea. So let me backtrack and read where we are. If one swears to abstain from something, he has not broken his oath if he performs something else. So those are some of the examples. If one swears to abstain from something, he has not broken his oath if he orders someone else to perform it. A lot of this also comes back to intention. But if I swear that I'm not going to do something and then I have somebody else do it, well, I haven't done it, so I have fulfilled my oath, is the basic idea. So the example that he gives, if a magistrate swore that he's not going to punish Zayd, and then he ordered the punisher, al-jallad, the person that carries out these type of hudud punishments, to punish him, he would not break the oath because he did not do it himself. Again, we default on the literal and immediate meaning. Like the thing with the divorce, I gave you the example in the previous clip. If a man says, if you leave the house, you're divorced, then we would interpret that to be immediately, like within the next several hours or in the next 24-hour period, or the day, but once we sleep and we get to the next day, then you've broken that. So we default, not always, but we default on the literal and the immediate meaning interpretation of the oaths and the vows. Except, of course, if the person making this oath intended themselves. So if the magistrate intended, I am not going to punish Zayd, meaning neither me or anybody else, and then he orders somebody else to do it, he would break his oath. So this goes back to the intention of the person that is swearing, and that's between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There was an example here I wanted to get. إلا أن يريد الحلف أنه لا يفعله وهو لا غير فيحنث بفعله أما لو حلف ألا ينكح فوكل في النكاح فإنه يحنث بفعله. Okay, so he says Ibn Qasim says in the commentary, except if a man, this would be a male thing, if a man swore not to engage in nikah, in a marriage contract, and then he deputized somebody to engage in a marriage contract for him. Well, he broke his oath because the marriage, you can't outsource marriage. If I do the marriage contract myself, or if I give a notary to somebody, a power of attorney to somebody to get me married to a certain woman, well, I'm still the one getting married. So in that case, I would have broken my oath. So that would be an exemption or an exception to what we just read. And then, if one swears to avoid two things, he has not broken his oath if he performs just one of them. Again, it's taken literally that you are performing two things. So if I say, I'm not going to wear, let me give you like an English example. I'm not going to wear this suit, but then I put on the slacks, or I only put on the jacket, then I have not broken because the suit is both of them together. Or, if I say I'm not going to eat apples and oranges, and I have an orange, I haven't broken my oath because I've done one, not the other. But if you do them at the same time, if I say I'm not going to wear the suit and then I put on the slacks and I put on the jacket, then I have broken the oath because I have done both at the same time. So the clothed example is the example he actually gives, Ibn Qasim gives in the commentary. Like he says, كَقَوْلِهِ وَاللَّهِ لَا أَلْبَسُ هَذَيْنِ ثَوْبَيْنِ فَفَعَلَ أَيْ لَبِسَ أَحَدَهُمَا لَمْ يَحْنَث. So if somebody said, by Allah, I swear I will not put on these two articles of clothing, that's why I gave you the suit example, because the minimal amount that would constitute a suit in the English language, if I said that, would be a bottom and a top, even if it was for women, like a skirt and a blazer or something, or a matching outfit. He would not break his oath, or the person would not break their oath if they wore one of them. فإن لبسهما معا أو مرتبا حنثا. But if they wore both of them at the same time or one after the other, then they would have broken their oath. However, if the person says, by Allah, I will not wear this or this, the pants or the jacket, continuing with my suit example, then you've specified. So now if you wear any of them, whether it be individually or together, then you have broken your oath because you swore that you're not going to do that. I hope by now it's very, very super clear that this is very, very literal stuff. And that's just the way it is. Okay. I have a few more minutes, so let me just give you a preview of what's to come about the kafara of the yameen, the expiation of the yameen, because this is one of the important things that it's mentioned in the Quran, obviously, and they kind of go hand in hand. Well, before I do that, let me kind of give you a little bit of conclusion about why I spent so much time on all those examples. By now, almost towards the end of the book, hopefully, and I'm assuming that people have consumed these courses more or less in order that they were meant to be. Hopefully you can see by now that one of the things that Islamic law is very good at is coming up with examples. And as a matter of fact, Imam al-Ghazali says in one of his writings about usul al-fiqh, and this is documented by As-Suyuti in in his book on ijtihad, الرد على من أخلد إلى الأرض وجهل أن الاجتهاد في كل عصر فرض, response to the person who wants to remain firmly grounded on earth, أخلد إلى الأرض, to stay on earth forever, which is almost like it's taken from a verse in the Quran, and is ignorant that ijtihad is obligatory in every age. That's the name of Imam As-Suyuti's book. So he quotes Al-Ghazali as saying, and I think this comes from Al-Ghazali's Haqiqat al-Qawlain book, or booklet, that one's ijtihad, one's ijtihad is only going to be as good as one's creativity. So other than knowing the stuff that we're studying, the fiqh and the usul and the qawa'id and like the mechanics of Islamic sciences, you also have to be a thinking person. So people like Al-Bayjuri that we're reading, or Nawawi or Rafi'i or Al-Ghazali or any of the great Al-Mawardi, any of the great fuqaha that we have, Al-Shirazi, they always have these. Some of the examples are ludicrous, like when we talked about sacrifices and anything from the sea is halal, even if it comes from the sea in the image, if it looks like a dog or a pig. Why are these crazy examples? To emphasize the rule, to emphasize the principle behind it, so that you are consistent in your thinking. And that most people are not consistent in anything in life, whether secular life or religious life or any life. We want to be super consistent. And these examples show you the extent of the consistency of the qa'dah. If there is a qa'dah, you can just take that and run it through all these examples. You will see that it is even keel. There are some differences, but the differences are not exceptions to the qa'dah. Usually they are similarities. An-nadhir, it's similar, but it's not the exact same thing. So the reason in this section I wanted to read for you the example, well, one of them, they're in the hashiyah. But the other thing is I want to show you the importance of understanding the literal interpretation of the vows, because the vows and the oaths have to be adjudicated by somebody. Somebody's going to have to answer the question, did I break my vow or not? So the literalness of it and the cultural definition, or sometimes as we saw in the example of the grass, the linguistic definition, and the immediacy of it, that it's done immediately. And that's very important. You will, in your life, in your Sharia Mashiach life, you probably will encounter this most in the issue of divorce. That's what I have found, not necessarily, but mostly in the issues of divorce. So I wanted to spend some time on those examples so you get a flavor of how the fuqaha think. These examples sometimes are meant to be ridiculous. Like there's no dog or pig fish that comes from the sea. I'm just referencing back to the previous module that we had, the previous unit. But when you hear it like that, you're like, oh, anything from the sea that's only sea animal is halal for us to eat. He's just trying to emphasize that point. And this is kind of the same case here. Okay, I see with this concluding preaching tangent, I don't have time to talk about the kafara, which is fine. I didn't want to get into that anyway in today's lecture. We'll do that tomorrow. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, in today's class, we were able to take the section or the conversation on vows. In yesterday's class, we did oaths, so here we're doing vows. And we learned that when somebody makes a vow to do something, they have the option either to carry it out or to expiate. And there are two minor dissenting opinions. One dissenting opinion says you have to expiate, and the other dissenting opinion says you have to carry out, which you do. But the majority opinion, the mu'tamad in the madhab, and that which we base our conduct on, is that if you make a vow, then you have the option to either carry it out or pay the expiation. We said there's no expiation if the oath was done or the vow was done unthinkingly, al-laghu, and that's from the text, the prima facie text of the Quran. And we said if somebody swears to abstain from something, they have not broken it if they perform something else. And then we learned that if one swears to abstain from something, you have not broken it if you order somebody else to do it. And then if you swear to do two things, to avoid two things, and you have not broken the oath if you perform just one of them. Those are the main points that we took. However, the bulk of the class was spent me trying to emphasize this lesson by giving you copious amounts of examples that come from the text, from the Hashia literature, and a couple from my own life experience, just to kind of make it a little bit more practical. And the reason, just to repeat, as I was saying in the previous clip, the last clip, the reason that that's important is that sometimes learning an abstract point of law is not helpful unless you are given examples. And the more ridiculous the examples are, the more likely the principle is going to stick in your mind. Not that these examples are going to happen. Some of them do. but not that they will necessarily happen, but it helps you remember. So, the couple of things that I want you to remember about this unit. The first is that the interpretation of oaths and vows is very literal. Number two is we need to take into consideration both linguistic and cultural expressions of the words said in the vow and the oath. And number three, we are biased towards the oath and the vow being interpreted as now. I vowed to do such and such, i.e., now. I told you not to do such and such by Allah, I mean now. And I wink like that, meaning because that's our interpretation, al fawr, to do it now. Not always, but that's the default of how we interpret it. And of course, the common denominator beneath all of this is the intention of the person that spoke the oath and the vow, which is why there has to be a dialogue between a qadi or a mufti or a faqih and that person if we are going to adjudicate a case. Those are the main points. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.